Okay, seriously, Okay, A-class assets, right? A-class, this is my definition, right? A-class assets would be River North, downtown areas, right? Where you're buying not necessarily on cash flow, but you're buying more based on appreciation, right? So we're looking at tenants who can pay, right, 6 months rent in advance, not a problem. Their cap rates, I would say between 4 and 5%, but your strategy is going to be banking mostly on appreciation based. Then we've got B-class properties, right? These are what we call 6 to 7% cap rate. So if you attended my last session on house hacking, that's what we typically target within house hacking in the north side of Chicago, right? Your B-class assets are going to be Logan Square, Albany Park, right? Avondale, right? Once you get into like the Roscoe Villages, Lincoln Parks, you're moving more into the A's, less cash flow, more appreciation, right? And once you go more north, right, Edgewater, Uptown, all those areas, right, you're moving more into the B's, right? C-class assets. These are moderate quality. So your B-class are typically going to have granite countertops, right, stock shaker cabinets. Your C-class, right, you're never going to put granite or quartz into a C-class property, right? We're talking about laminate countertops, Home Depot stock oak color cabinets, right? Those are your finishes that you're looking for. You're looking for durability, right, and cheap turnover. But your tenants typically live paycheck to paycheck, right? So I always say with my Milwaukee properties, right, I've seen this, I had almost 100 units. Seen it happen more times than I ever want to admit, but their car breaks down, right? And it's going to cost $400 to fix their car. They do not have the money to pay for that, right? So now they're in a position where, how do I get to work and make more money? So I can either pay for this money out of my rent budget and get my car fixed and go to work, or I could pay my rent, right, and not go to work and then you fall behind. So those tiny little things like that, maybe to you and I, right, that wouldn't set us back very far, will set back a C-class tenant and cause them to at least be late on rent. Okay? You're talking about 8-9% cap rates, right, when we see these on paper. When I'm saying cap rates, I'm talking about on paper here. And then there's what we call D-quality properties, right? These are when we see 10% cap rates on paper. These are typically people with rent assistance, right? Areas like Austin or Greater New York Crossing, where the numbers that you see sound like home run investment, right? Not always reality. So I got some fun stories for you. You're investing in C-class assets. One of the things you want to look for is what are the ordinances, okay? Who here thinks Chicago is landlord friendly? No. That's so weird to hear. Okay. So that I've been a landlord in Chicago for 12 years. I do not have a problem at all with the landlord tenant ordinance. I think it's fair. It's very spelled out. I've never had a problem keeping within the lines of the ordinance. Right. The problems come when you don't read the ordinance. They don't know what you're doing. They don't follow the rules. Right. It's not that hard to quick pay someone $1 interest when you send their lease renewals, right? It's really not that hard, but you got to know that you have to do it, right? And remember to do it to not get stuck for 2 to 3 times your security deposit, right? So those are all just things that I check. Milwaukee is a very, very landlord-friendly city. So when you're looking at C-class assets, that's one of your determining factors, right? Is how are they going to handle tenants? So I said, 12 years of being a landlord here in Chicago, I've only once ever filed for eviction. And I never actually got to the actual court date. My tenant ended up moving out. But it took us 3 months before we even had a court date set to even start the eviction process. Milwaukee, for example, I can go in on the 6th and show them my paperwork that I filed the 5-day. I will get a court date probably around the 15th of the month. And when we go to court, they ask the tenant one question. Do you dispute how much you owe her? Can you prove to me that you paid rent, you've got receipts, and that? And they're like, no, but I don't care. They will stop them right there. I don't care what story you have. I don't care what sob story, what's going on. You owe her money, and they'll look to me and say, what do you want to do? We can do what we call steps, or you can get your rent, right? You can out today, or get a rent from the sheriff, or you can work out a payment plan with the tenant, right? It doesn't matter if they have bed bugs, or, I'm asking them to be prepared. They don't care. They don't care at all. They will give you a writ that day, bring it to the sheriff, and in about a week, the tenant's out. So 30 days, that tenant is on the street, right? Fantastic landlord-friendly law. So the only reason why I did not lose tons of money in Milwaukee was because they had very, very friendly landlord-friendly laws. So let's start with Let It Burn. Who's got a great tenant story for me? Anyone? Anyone? You got one?
Me?
No, not you, John. I know you got some.
Yeah, somebody else. I had a property in back of the yards, and the guy didn't pay me $1 since I bought the building, and he was a gang member that threatened me. I tried to collect rent.
So he said that he bought a property, the tenant was non-paying from the get-go, who was a gang member and threatened him. I had a tenant burn down my building. Not once, but twice. So, always on vacation. I'm always on vacation when this happens. Like, so think, like, luckily for liability, like I was out of town. But I had a tenant burn down my 4-unit in the middle of the night. I had a tenant who we bought the house, and 10 days later, the girlfriend caught her boyfriend cheating on her, took a baseball bat to all of our windows, and then went to the gas station, bought one of those, things, run things of gas, poured it on his car, and blew up our garage. And I mean, I'm in Rome, and I get a video of my property manager of like our garage just burnt down the neighbor's garage, signing up the building. I had tenants who refused. They got bed bugs. It was a duplex. We brought in, the bed bug treatment, whatever. The people came in. They've got to wash. Part of that is they have to wash their clothes, their bedding. Refuse to do it. This went on for about a year, where they kept reinfecting the building with bed bugs. We put new tenants in the duplex downstairs. 2 months later, they'd get bed bugs. They wanted to move. We ended up having to vacate the entire building, tent it, heat it, wait a month, do it again, and then literally had to pay someone to sleep in there at night to see if they got bed bugs. Right? I'm not even kidding. We had to pay someone.
How much?
Like, do you want to go sleep in a vacant building in the middle of winter to see if you get bed bugs and bring them home? But it costs about $20,000. Right? That tenant cost us about $20,000 between vacancies, right? The cost of doing all the bed bug treatment, right? The stuff that's happened to me in my C-class assets, right, is nowhere near what my B-class in Chicago has come to. Like, I mean, my worst thing was like a tenant backed into my garage once and knocked it off, right? Not a big deal. Or I had tenants that flushed paper towels instead of toilet paper and had to cause a plumbing problem, but never the amount of damage and expenses that I saw in the Milwaukee properties. The other thing with C-class assets, right, is property management. So, who here self-manages? Who here self-manages?
Oh, wow.
Who uses the property management? Very little. Okay. So, I started the portfolio as in 2015. I started buying there. I thought I was the smartest person in the world, and I was going to be all about systems and processes, right? Efficiencies, systems, all those things. So I knew that we were going to be buying, we were going to be acquiring quite quickly, right? And I knew that hiring out property managers, right, outsourcing that gives you very little control, right? And if they screw up, they cost you money. So I started out building my own in-house team. So I had a property manager. He was actually one of the sellers who had managed my first set of properties. He was already managing them for the family. So I took him on board and we trained him to be my property manager. Carlos. So I'd go up to Milwaukee every week or two, and Carlos would hand me packets full of receipts. He would go deposit $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in my bank account, and I asked him what this is for. He would just hand me receipts. Here you go. No idea who paid rent, when they paid rent, who owed who, like what their balances were. Like, he was really, really great with contractors, right? He was great with my tenants. He was great with like handling repairs, right? Getting guys to do stuff at reasonable prices. Amazing. Bookkeeping, accounting, having any idea what's going on financially, terrible. So after I was going up to Milwaukee pretty much every 10 days and spending the night and going through the books, right? And going through things with him. Creating systems, leases, all that stuff. And after about a year and a half, I gave up and decided to go with full-time property management. So I'm a big believer, and I've said it a million times before, that a property manager can make or break your investment, right? Bob and I were just talking about a situation with a client of his who, you know, she bought the properties here in Chicago, wasn't local to the area, never saw them before she purchased them, right? Relied heavily on the property manager to show her pictures and inspection reports, you know, and as time went on, you know, properties weren't being rented, she was losing money, she finally came up here and saw the properties and immediately sold them because they were pieces of shit that she would have never bought in the first place had she actually gone and looked at them, right? Property managers can really tank your business. One of the lessons that I just learned myself was just because you're with someone, right, and they did good before, doesn't mean that they are currently doing good. So I just fired my property manager for a lot of these reasons, right? We ran into a lot of problems with communication, with double billings, right? We were working through them, but it got to the point where like this is reoccurring every month, and after we've been together for almost 7 years, it's time to jump ship and change property managers. So if you're investing in C-class assets though, did you listen to John's presentation? I'm sure you talked about this, about self-managing C-class.
I didn't go for that angle. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you ever think you want to self-manage C-class, you can message either me or John, and we will talk you out of it. Absolutely. So the other thing, evictions matter where you're buying, how much evictions cost. I also can't tell you in C-class markets how often we've bought in buildings, and by the time we even send a letter to the tenants that were the new owners, they're just left. They just move out in the middle of the night, right? And then you don't sometimes know. We've had it happen a million times where like people just leave and they haven't paid rent in 2 months, and you're calling your property manager like, hey, what's the status? Like, they're not communicating. Well, have you gone there and knocked on the door and checked? And they're like, yeah, we'll send someone over. Like, oh, it's empty. You know, they moved out. Well, when did they move out? I have no idea. You know, and that's 2 months of vacancy that you just took that because your property manager wasn't competent. The other thing is CapEx costs. So how much does the furnace cost? Do you know? $4,000, right? When you're investing, like here in Chicago, right, I have my B-class assets. My building brings in, let's say, $6,000 a month in rent, right? So I'm putting a certain percentage, right? What do we use for percentages for CapEx? Someone have a good number to use?
5.
10% CapEx? No, for a B-class. 3-5% CapEx, right? Because the reality is, if your units are renting for $1,800 a month or $600 a month, furnaces cost the same thing. Furnaces, roofs, hot water heaters, right? I thought I was really conservative with my numbers going into this. I think I was budgeting about 30% for repairs and CapEx, not realizing that I needed to put way more money aside. So I pulled up, I actually went through, who's heard of the 50% rule? Big rule in bigger pockets, right? If 50% of your expenses cover the mortgage, the principal and interest, right? Then it should be profitable. Here's my actual numbers of owning C-class assets, right? My expense ratio ended up being 70%, right? I will tell you right now, when I did my original portfolio analysis, I was not using 70% expenses. So repairs and CapEx was about 25% of my budget. Property management came up to 10, even though I paid them 8%. That includes lease-up fees, all that, right? Utilities, right? Vacancy ended up being about 15%. So in Chicago, so I've been a landlord for 12 years here in Chicago. I just ran my numbers on that. My average vacancy is less than 0.5%. 12 years of being a landlord. Up there, it's 15%. A lot of it has to do with tenants just leaving in the middle of the night or not paying, increased vacancy costs. So if you are considering buying C-class assets, right? When I said before, cap rates on paper, right? If you're using a 50% expense ratio, I encourage you to use more, be more conservative. If it still works at a 70% expense ratio, then I would consider buying it, but I would not be looking at any C-class assets under that number. So I also ran my complete analysis of the portfolio just to show you. So when we bought these properties, we paid $1.7 million. We sold them for $2.8 million. Based on the actual expenses over the time that I had them, right? When we bought them, we ended up performing at a 9.88% cap rate. The guy who bought my buildings, right, those same exact buildings, He's operating at a 6% cap rate, using those same expenses. I can guarantee you he did not run his numbers conservatively, otherwise there's no way he would have ever bought these. And with interest rate changes, it takes my monthly profit of $7,000 a month to, $7,000 a month to $0 a month. So he just spent $2.8 million on problems that don't provide any cash flow. And that's one of the things that you need to look at. So this is a lesson learned for those who are looking at investing, right? You gotta really run your numbers. We got lucky only because of the time we bought, right? I will tell you right now, only reason this business was a success was pure luck and timing. If I would have done it again these days, I would have been losing money every single month. So that's what I got as far as my presentation. What questions do we have? Yeah.
How many doors did you have when you scaled to actually hire a property manager?
So the first set of properties I bought, God, it's been a while. I think I bought 27 units in one day.
Wow.
So that was the first set of properties. So I started with one of the owners was Carlos, who became a property manager. The other 4 were his in-laws' properties that he'd already been managing. So I started off with him from the get-go because he would do the properties. And then as we grew, we kept adding more properties. But Carlos was with us for about a year and a half. If it was local properties, I think it would be a little bit different. But you can, the amount of, even with a full-time property management staff, so let's be clear, my property management staff has at least 10 employees. You know, they are full
Those are all
service.
multifamily, right?
These are all 2 to 4 unit properties, yeah. I still spent more time managing my manager in Milwaukee, who I paid $50,000 a year to manage my properties, than I did self-managing my B-class assets. 10 times more time, really. I said the amount of problems that you get from managing C-class was so drastic. My tenants in Chicago, maybe once a year they call me with something. My tenants in Milwaukee, it was a constant, it's like we were talking about this before. You know, the toilet has been leaking for 3 months. They never thought to tell the property manager. Now your floor's all rotted, right? Now there's a leak in the guy below, right? Now they gotta turn off the water for the whole building. That stuff happened to us all the time. Dumb things. Someone else, their tenant's heat went out. They didn't tell the landlord, but they just left the stove on for heat. Started a fire, burnt their building down. You know, a lot of stuff. What was your question? Yeah.
Given the amount of time you had to spend managing your C-class in Milwaukee, if you were to do it all over again, would you do anything differently, invest in different asset classes, or are you ultimately happy because it provided a lot of cash flow for the amount of risk you took?
Well, the problem is, that's why I wanted to show you the before and after, essentially, if you do it now, I would not do it again. The only reason why this wasn't a huge blunder for me was because we made money on it.
Yeah.
You know, we cash flowed right, even with all the problems, and ended up selling it for, you know, almost $1 million more, or $1.1 million more than we bought it for. Right? That's the only reason. If I would have sold it for what I bought them for, oh man, I've been looking back in the last 9 years of my life being like, what did I just do? Right? I messed up. So that's the only reason why I would, there's the term more money, more problems, right? I thought I was being the smartest person in the world, buying based on cash flow, not thinking about asset class, what my tenants would be, right? I used to always say things like, you know, and while our units weren't bad, like I would never buy a building or rent out a unit that I wouldn't personally live in, right? But the quality of tenants from B to C to me is hugely drastic. You know, and it wasn't even COVID. So when COVID happened, right? If you remember, when everything shut down and everyone couldn't go to work, right? The huge thing with landlords was, well, what's rent collection going to be? You know, and why Chicago properties, I did not have one late payment with my tenants. My Milwaukee properties, I didn't actually have that much. People were still working. Like it wasn't some catastrophic change where we lost a lot of rent. I think we only ended up evicting 2 tenants out of maybe 70 because of COVID. So it wasn't like that, but it was just the other ongoing problems that we had consistently throughout the years.
No, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
Two questions. One of them is, and if it's personal, that's.
I don't like
obviously
personal.
don't like- Why did you sell all the Milwaukee properties except
Yeah.
for 4? And the second one, as people moved out or as they were evicted, did you do a total rental of that unit? And the reason I asked that, my son and I totally put everything in new on C-class properties on the front end. Everything's new, rewired, new furnaces, new heaters, or new water heaters, everything. And we've had very few problems so far.
A lot of good questions. So I'll start with the second one because that one's easier for me. So again, you need to understand your tenant class and your assets, right? So in Chicago, right, where my units rent for, let's say on average, $1,600 a month. Okay. I had a building that I bought in 2013. It was renovated, or 2012. It was renovated. The kitchens weren't renovated. So I have a tenant who's been there for 7 years, and he asked me to paint his cabinets. I'm like, listen, I'll redo your kitchen for you. I don't want it. Like, once you move out, renew your kitchen.
Right.
You know, I'll put in new shaker cabinets, quartz, right, nice backsplash, new appliances, because that is only going to give you more rent down the road, and that's marketable, right?
Right.
You would never do that in Milwaukee in C-class
Really?
assets. No. Your goal, because your tenants are going to destroy it anyways. You know, so your goal is if your cabinets are falling off, you just put a new door on. You would never redo
Do you know
your
with the
cabinets.
credit checks and everything?
Oh, you can do contracts, but you're talking about when rent is about, let's say our average rent is about $700 a month.
Oh, wow.
That's the average rent up there. You know, you're buying properties right now, or selling a duplex sells for $120.
Oh, wow.
So you've got to understand, like, you would never spend that much money, right? So it comes down to cost benefit analysis. So my property manager would tell me, hey, we want to replace your carpet with LVT. My question always is, how much is it going to cost, and what's my rent increase going to be? And until you tell me those two things, I'm not telling you yes or no. Because tenants will rent out with, you know, not
Did you
terrible
ever take a
carpet.
chance on putting that stuff in on a test unit and seeing if you could drive the rent up or not?
Oh, almost every single unit of ours had converted to LVP because that was a smart decision, right?
Right.
But I still need to know what those numbers are to make those sort of decisions. So again, it depends, but a lot of it was repairs. We had tenants for 6 years. They just left in January before I sold. They ended up moving out like 2 weeks after we went on our contract. It cost me $8,000 to renovate their unit. Their rent is $800 a month. So they went from 6 years of tenants, paying $800 a month. I spent $8,000 renovating it, and my rent bumped to $825. That was not an investment decision.
Right.
That was a cleaning up the holes in the wall, right, and the things that were torn out,
Right.
and the long-term damage. It was just getting that unit back to rentable cost $8,000. So when you look at it that way, that takes out, like, I think I did the math on it. It ended up being like 2 years cash flow of that building gone from one turnover. So your first question, though, was why did I sell? So that's a funny story. I was at an event just like this. So who heard me yesterday when what's his face? Robert was talking. So who doesn't know what a yield curve is? And I raised my hand. I don't know what a yield curve is because I don't. I'm terrible. Like economic stuff, I find really interesting, but I'm not very keen to it. So I was at a conference in Philadelphia, Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, put on by Dave Van Horn, and the first speaker of the conference was an economist. So he was on stage talking all these big words I didn't understand. I'm writing things down in my notebook, like Google what this is, because I don't know. So at the end of the conference, they were doing a charity auction, right? And so part of that charity auction was buying the speaker's time. So when the economist went up for auction, I bought his time. I wanted to learn more about economic factors, right? I know real estate stuff, I know local stuff, but I don't know what a yield curve is and how that impacts my world of real estate, right? Or banking thing, like I don't know that stuff. So I hired him, and part of that was he did a consultation for me. So he said, send me some of your entire portfolio data, because I use the property management system, Buildium. Download it all for me and give it to me. We'll talk in a few weeks, what he had said. So that I'm super on top of accounting. I love accounting. I love looking at my numbers and my reports, right? I always looked back like year over year, quarter over quarter, like where are we at this year, right? I never went back 7 years. And it wasn't until he did that for me, he went back 7 years, looked at all my numbers, showed me some huge holes in my business, and said, like, why are you keeping some of these properties? I'm like, well, as a whole, right, we're performing at 10% cap rate. He's like, yes, but some are performing at 13, some are performing at 4. And I hadn't really looked back at like the historical performance of my properties. So he built out all these different numbers for me, IRRs and spreadsheets. There was like 20 columns of stuff, which I don't understand half of still. The one I understood was he broke down what was my annual cash flow, right? Took that, looked at what I could sell it for, what my profit would be, and how many years of cash flow would that be. So when I looked at that and said, my trigger was 10 years. So I'm like, okay, well, some of these properties I could sell tomorrow and get 15 years of cash flow. Or I can keep it for 15 years and still get the same gain, right? So that's why I started selling. I started selling in 2018.
Sure.
I think I put it up there. I sold a couple. And then the next year I reevaluated, right? I went through, pulled that year's numbers, added them to the thing, and started watching trends. Because at the end of the day, that we had so many properties, I can tell you, for some reason, when one unit goes, the other unit goes. I could have buildings that are long-term tenants, right, no problems for 3 years, and then within 6 months, it costs me $10,000 to fix things up in that property. Like one turns, they turn fast, and they cycle through. So I would start noticing downtrends. Hey, we used to make, the first 5 years we were making 10 grand on this property a year, and then it went down to 8, and now we're at 5, and then this year we're producing 3. Like I'm selling it. So that's how I slowly sold the portfolio off.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When you were talking about that last property with the 25% capex,
Yeah.
right? You had held that property for how long?
Well, depends which one. I bought them all in
You had
essentially 20.
You were spending 25% of your capex.
That was all of them. That was the average.
All of them combined.
Mhm.
That was an average.
That was an average. I
Okay.
went back and pulled my historical numbers, and then broke down what our average over all the properties, the entire portfolio during our ownership, what our actual expenses were.
But were you were spending that much, but were you setting aside a reserve
Oh yeah.
every year? And when you bought it originally, you had put a ton of money into the property to bring it up to market rent, or you just bought it whatever was operating at and didn't spend much money up front?
So there is,
Cost down the road.
in C-class assets, at least in my experience, there is not a big spread between current rents and market rents. So there's really not in Milwaukee, yeah.
Milwaukee.
There's not much that you're not gonna go in there and put in new kitchens, new bathrooms,
Okay.
to get market rents when your market rent is $100 more.
Right.
It's just not gonna make financial sense.
Right.
But we would, our big thing, almost all of our units are converted from carpet to LVP. That was not only for cleanliness, turnover, but that would increase our rents. That was really the major, then mechanicals, of course. But besides painting and fixing things, no, we would spend, what was the number? $130,000 a year, I think. Yeah, $130,000 a year. That was probably $110,000 of repairs. Or things that were broken versus actual improvements to the properties.
Turnover.
It's high. I can tell you when I originally planned, when I said when I was so smart, thinking that this was a great idea, my numbers did not include $130,000 of renovation every year.
No.
I can guarantee you.
And what did you underwrite it at for expenses?
Oh, I probably did 10% repair, 10% capex.
No, like total expenses.
Oh, I would think I was at 40%.
40%. Okay.
So my pro forma was about a 13-14% cap rate. So again, I'm still not crying because we ended up just below 10% on our actual performance, but that is only because of luck and market timing, honestly. If you bought that same portfolio today, it would not be a profitable, smart decision to make.
Unless it doesn't money, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, and it wouldn't make sense because the rents are there.
Correct.
And the reason here is because it was Class C. If you would have invested in Class B, this deal would be a lot better. Because purpose would be Class B.
Oh yeah.
It would be.
I should have pulled my Class B properties over the last 12 years and showed you those numbers.
Yeah.
Completely different picture.
And what you invested right now in Chicago is Class B.
Correct.
So Class C, what you're saying is Class C should, yes, yeah.
I'm not saying forget about it, right? I'm saying you should know what you're getting yourself into, right? I think a lot of, especially newer investors, right, we're using online calculators. Bigger Pockets is a great calculator, but it's asking you to put in the numbers. It doesn't put the numbers for you, right? So if you don't have realistic expectations of what the numbers are, right, or if you start using B-class numbers on C-class assets, you're going to run into a lot of problems. You know, and had it been local, right, that might have been a different story for me. Had it been maybe 8 units, right, only, could I have managed, right, 8 separate units, a few blocks from my house? Sure, different story. But investing out of state, having such a large portfolio, and in a very C-class market, so the only reason why I didn't lose my shirt was because I bought the right time. Yeah.
I was wondering kind of 2 parts here. If you were going to start today and construct a portfolio, thinking ahead about 10 years, seems like the BRRRR strategy is a little hard to recycle the cash back, right? So in terms of scaling, it seems like it's slow, cash flow is limited, Airbnb is harder. How would you construct a portfolio? Just seems like it's like a bleak outlook almost.
I think it depends on your goals. So the question was, how would you construct a portfolio, right? One of the things. So I was on the Bigger Pockets podcast 9 years ago, right? It was right before I bought the first 27 whatever units, and then they had me come back a year later after I just bought another 13 buildings, another 56 units I think it was, and everyone was that scaled so quickly. That was not the smartest thing to do. My point. So if you're I'm a huge believer of slow and steady wins the race, right? People think that they hear these stories, right? You have Joe this morning, I love Joe. He's got an astronomically large portfolio, right? And you hear those stories and you're like, well, can I get there myself? Right? That's not for everyone. I'm a huge fan of, you can always buy a property, get it controlled, right? Save your capital, use the cash flow. 2-3 years later, do another one, right? Over time, right, you're going to set yourself up for success, right? But it doesn't have to be quick. It doesn't have to be fast. You don't have to, win the award for the fastest scaling portfolio, right? Because that causes problems. Had I gone slower, I would not have been, I don't want to say mess, right? Because it's not really a mess, but I lost tens of thousands of dollars and made many errors because I went so fast. Had I known what I know now, I would not have done it that way, right? It was exciting, it was fun, but it ended up costing me a lot of money.
And then my second part was, how would you go about sourcing these deals for this portfolio construction off market?
Depends, right? I can tell you how I bought some of these properties. So I was at a showing. The agent had talked to me, we went to go open the door for the tenants. Okay, how was so-and-so soccer game? And they're like, oh, they good. Then we go to the next unit, and it was like, oh, did so-and-so win their spelling bee? He just knew his tenants. That was Carlos, my property manager. He interacted with his tenants, because he was actually the seller. I wanted to interact with my tenants. That's why I hired him, right? He was excellent with tenants. So when we were leaving, I told him, well, I want to offer on your property, right? But I'm buying multiple properties. I haven't found them yet. So can I have a 60-day closing, which gives me 30 days to find more? And his response to me was, oh, you're looking to buy more properties. I was like, yeah. My mother-in-law has a bunch of properties. I can ask her if she wants to sell. And that's how I got my first 5 properties, I spent a ton of time in Milwaukee. There was this shitty bar on the south side I'd go to, and there was a postman that I became friends with. I got 2 deals off of him. Just sitting in the bar talking to the postman, hey, who, anyone's got a house they're selling? And he's like, oh yeah, this one, we've been delivering mail there, right? And no one's ever home. Here's the address. Asking questions. This guy, George, I bought 6 properties off of George. I did direct mail, right? All those things, right? I bought a bunch of the MLS. There's a bunch of different ways, right? I just made it, I was up there so much, and I'm this little blonde girl, and just walking around their streets, they know I'm not from there. I just made myself known what I was doing, what my intentions were. Hey, I want to buy properties in this area if you know of anyone selling. I go on a showing and be like, I don't like this house, but hey, if you guys are coming up, let me know. Right? It was just having that communication, I'm personally not a fan of direct mail. I hate the phone calls. I can do the direct mail. I can pay someone to send the postcards out, but when I get the phone calls, I hate it. Absolutely hate it. It's my least favorite form of marketing. It also depends on the market cycle, right? I was buying a lot, I bought in 2014, 2015, 2016, before things got to be more of a seller's market. Nowadays, well, up until 6 months ago, we'll see how it goes, right? Why would, if I did a couple of direct mail campaigns in Chicago, I really, really struggled with it. Because why would they sell it to me at a discount when they can put it on the MLS, get multiple offers, over asking price in 72 hours, right? Even if you hire an agent, pay a broker's fee, right? You're still gonna profit more by putting it in the market and getting its most exposure. So I'm not a huge fan of wholesale deals now. We'll see how the market turns and if that changes things. But I really spun my wheels a lot trying to find off-market deals in Chicago by doing that. Plus I sucked at the phone calls. Yeah.
So you mentioned this 80-year-old guy who doesn't want to pay taxes.
Yeah.
I actually know socially this older guy. He's got a portfolio, and it's kind of falling apart. He's just getting to the point he can't manage himself. And maybe it's kind of an adjacent question, but like with these C-class portfolios that some of these older folks have built up and just like falling into disrepair, like what's the opportunity you think in terms of approaching somebody like that to buy their portfolio?
So that's a good question. It depends, right? A lot of the times, in fact, I bought properties from those guys too. There's no money to fix them up. That's why they're in disrepair, right? That's the problem. Whether it's, we had money to fix them up, but, a lot of times it was because I was forced to, right? I had no other choice, right? I had to do these things. So if I were to approach someone like that, I would look at it, is it going to be profitable for you, right? The benefit to them is you're taking it off of their hands, right? The benefit to you is it has to be profitable. So again, when we're looking at some of these my properties, here in Chicago, I could do like a $30,000 renovation, right? Floors, paint, kitchens, baths, but I could increase rents $500 to $600 a month per unit, right? There, I could do the same renovation, right? Because materials cost the same, and get maybe $50 to $75 more. So those are the one things you need to look at is this going to be profitable for you, right? And how you structure it creatively, there's a lot of options, right? You can do seller financing, you can do sub two, right? You can make it beneficial to you, but you need to make sure that it's actually a smart decision. Because not all properties, like I talked before, I analyze 2,000 properties a year in the Chicago market. I find maybe 200 that I think are worth taking a look at. Just because they're investment properties doesn't mean they're good investments. So I would really I'd be cautious on how it's going to be profitable for you and then move forward.
Right. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Did I scare you guys enough yet?
So much more technically for you. I mean, it sounds like you really have a good bookkeeping process.
I love accounting. I'm super dork about accounting.
What do you use to like keep track of your expenses?
Oh my god, a bunch. So I've got two different accounting systems. One I use Buildium for my properties. It's my favorite property management software. I think their minimum though is like, it used to be $1 a unit, but you gotta have at least 50 units. So like if you only have like 3 units, 4 units, 5 units, it doesn't make sense to use Buildium. My other favorite is Quicken Desktop. Okay. Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, QuickBooks is the devil, right? QuickBooks is awful. And Quicken is like their dumbed down version for non-accountants, right, is Quicken. But both of their online versions, they got like a monthly subscription software. I hate it, it's terrible. But I love their desktop. It's a CD-ROM or a download from Amazon. It links with your Chase account. So every 2 weeks that I have time before I sold all these, in 9 LLCs, I have like 18 different bank accounts. I can do my accounting in about an hour every 2 weeks. You press the button, it links with your Chase, it imports all the new transactions. So it notices that when I pay Tiny Tot, my daughter's daycare, it tags that as daycare. And it learns those things. So it knows that Amazon, where I spent like $30,000 last year, is shopping. And it tags that as shopping. So like setting it up takes a little bit, but then once you get it set up, you're just going through, right? It knows that when you pay DNL landscaping, right, that's going to be your lawn care, your snow care, right? You can tag it by building. So every year my accounting is just pulling a report, sorting it by tags, and sending it off to my CPA. But I love accounting. I used to spend hours trying to figure out a penny discrepancy. I'm not even kidding. Like download them, I got the highlighter, I'm checking like where's the penny difference. Took me a while to like let those things go. You know, if it's under $100, just like put it as a balance adjustment, right? And move on. Because I would spend way too much time doing that. Yeah. Do you have a question?
So as far as the C-Class, I invested a lot of C-Class in Chicago area, and very similar experiences as you had in Milwaukee. I think one thing that's a little different that I thought was like part of the problems is that the buildings are so old and there's like so many things that have not been maintained, like they're C-Class property probably. So like a lot of leaks that were also like causing a lot of calls from the tenants about issues. But it sounds like the ones in Milwaukee that you were referring to, they were newer properties?
Oh no. No. We have a lot of the same problems. You know, again, a lot of toilets, tenants flushing things can cause a lot of like plumbing problems. But you know, Milwaukee was built similar to Chicago, at least in the area I invested on the south side. Very similar look to Chicago. Lots of multi-units, right? Small duplexes, triplexes, some single families, but very similar to like how Chicago's built. So that Milwaukee is built typically on cinder, it's frame above. So the basement is cinder and then it's frame. But Milwaukee is marshy. So it used to be celery fields. So we had a lot of foundation problems. If you've got, what time is it? Okay, I got 1 minute to tell you my story about how I got sued for $50,000. I had to pay it 2 years ago. It really sucked. I sold a building. I sold a building in 2019, and I get a demand letter from a lawyer for $200,000 right before Christmas, saying that, you know, I was represented and I hid things from them and all this stuff. You know, I'm like, this is a load of bullshit. So I hired like a regular, like, you know, lawyer. I'm like, can you just write them a letter, you know? And she spent a couple $100 saying, like, you know, this is all the reasons why your case is invalid. Like, we're not doing anything. Move on, right? And I called Brandon Turner. I called Tarl. I'm like, what do I do? You know, and they're like, oh, this is, you know, this never comes to fruition, right? Like, just write your demand letter back and then move on. So I thought it was good. And about 6 months later, I actually got a lawsuit in the mail. They sued me. So I had to hire a very, very expensive litigation attorney to go through things. So I had to bring my own structural engineering. So long story short, they call them Polish flats there, but similar like English gardens here, right? Your basement unit is below grade. So what happened was, when the house was built in 1890, it was built with a wood beam at grade. And then they put in posts, and then they poured concrete blocks. That was the foundation. And then it was covered with wood slats, and then it was covered with drywall, and about 8 layers of wallpaper, and then more drywall. So they were suing me because the house had literally no, like the wood was completely rotting. It was, even my structural engineers like, you sold this house for I think $140,000, it's gonna cost about $200,000 to fix it. They've got to literally jack up the entire house and redo the entire foundation. You know, and it was a really nice, sweet couple who saved all their money for 2 years to get an FHA loan, but every single last penny they had down this house, and this house was trashed. Problem was, like, I had no idea, obviously. My property manager had no idea. There was no way anyone could have known unless they removed the drywall, all the layers of wallpaper from the 50s, all the wood slab that had been there since God knows when, and then saw the beam. But there was one piece of drywall that was stamped during my ownership at the very back of the house, not even near the foundation, right? It was at the very, like the back door, and that's why they were suing me. So this went on for like 6 months. It cost me about $20,000 in legal fees. I was supposed to go to court in August. I had a baby, so I was still on maternity leave, and I was still nursing the baby. And it had to be it was like a 5 or 6 day trial, they said. So then they offered mediation. And so we went through like a mediation process. I'm like, listen, I'm not budging. Like, I have not done anything wrong. Take me to court, sue me, I will prove it to you. Like, but my lawyer had come to me and said, listen, this is a very content heavy case, right? Very fact intensive. You need to hire experts, expert witnesses, structural engineers, right? Like rebuild people. Like, it's gonna cost you $40,000 to even go to court. So here are your options. You can pay them off $50,000 now and be done with this situation. It's been going on for over a year, or plus $20,000 in legal fees. Or you can pay me $40,000 in legal fees to go to court and take your chances. So that ended up costing me like $70,000 about a year ago. On a property I profited $30,000
Are there
on.
pre-sale inspections required in Milwaukee or?
Not in the city, no. But there's no, my inspector, their inspector, there's no way it would have been caught.
Really?
There was, you literally, the only reason they even found out a year later is because they were redoing the bedroom. They pulled the drywall. They found like all the, it went back, 50, 60 years and saw that there's this wood beam. Like even my structure engineers, like I've seen this kind of building structure twice. Like really, it was how it was built in 1890. It was built dysfunctionally, right? And no one knew because it was covered up. So like, there was no way, but still, the cost to go to court, to even take your chances and ensure that the jury understands these things, right, wasn't worth $10,000 risk.
Doesn't title insurance or anything like that?
Because they were suing me for misrepresentation. Because I changed that one piece of drywall, they're saying that I knew and that I hid it. Because it was dated during my ownership. That's why.
Very expensive for
Extremely expensive piece of drywall, let me tell you. That was like golden glitter drywall. Should shoot rainbows. Yeah. Yeah, it was a learning experience, right?
There's nothing you could have done.
There's nothing I could have done. There's nothing. I don't know. That's a Bob question. Would insurance cover something like that? Title insurance, homeowners insurance?
They're gonna try to get out of this having pre-existing,
Yeah,
insurance, that's gonna turn into insurance litigation.
yeah,
Here's probably what it's running.
yeah, exactly. So we've got the next session, raising capital on the main stage. Thank you guys for attending. If you have any more questions?